What if everything you knew about yourself was a lie? What if the place meant to save you whispered your name like a curse, every night at midnight? This is not a ghost story. This is a story of a boy who was erased, and a mansion built to forget him. But when the truth started whispering through the attic walls, he didn't run. He listened. And what he discovered would tear apart everything, even the silence itself. At exactly 12 a.m., a whisper curls through the attic's shadows. Elijah. The Tesla slid up the gravel driveway like a panther prowling into sacred land. Its matte black finish glistened under the last orange flicker of twilight, cutting through the chilled mountain air of Asheville. Inside sat a boy who carried no name of weight, no family of memory, only a tightly zipped backpack and a strange birthmark pulsing faintly beneath his collarbone, as if trying to tell a story no one ever listened to. Nathaniel had known many roofs in his 17 years, some leaking, some loud, some so crowded he disappeared into silence. But none like this. Before him stood the infamous Silence Estate, veiled in overgrown ivy and shadowed glass. It rose like a secret above the forest line, all sharp corners and unnatural stillness, a structure that looked more like a forgotten gallery than a home. The driver didn't speak as the rear door swung open. No warm welcome. Just a silent gesture toward the giant mahogany door, now creaking open on its own. Nathaniel stepped out into a world he couldn't read yet, one where every window watched him and every tree whispered, "Don't forget again." Inside the mansion, everything breathed technology, voice-activated panels, chrome fixtures and lighting that dimmed to your heartbeat. Yet, for all its modern grandeur, there was a pervasive hush, like the house itself was listening more than living. Then she appeared. Seraphine Wycliffe glided down the marble staircase, dressed in slate gray, as if mourning something unnamed. Her hair was silver, yet her skin looked untouched by age. She moved like a woman who had walked through fire and survived it without a scar. "Nathaniel," she said softly, eyes trailing over him with a gaze that almost hurt. "You've come a long way." She didn't hug him. She didn't smile. But she nodded, and that nod opened doors. Within the hour, he was being escorted, not to a guest room, not to a warm wing of the house, but to the attic. No explanation, no ceremony. The housekeeper, a silent woman in tan linen, led him past digital portraits that blinked when stared at, and staircases that retracted into the wall. They walked in silence up the spiral steps, past floors that whispered movement behind locked doors, until they reached the final door. The attic. It wasn't dusty or abandoned. It was pristine, glass tiles, minimalist furniture, and a view that overlooked the thick canopy of trees behind the estate. But it was wrong. The air felt thick, still, tuned. Nathaniel set his backpack on the lone bed and turned to ask why this room. But the housekeeper had already vanished, the door sealed behind her. As he approached the wall-mounted control panel to call for her, he noticed something odd. No audio settings were available in the attic, the entire sound system disabled. That night, as the house dimmed into its nightly hush, Nathaniel sat on his bed, trying to read one of the old books he found tucked beside the window seat. But his eyes kept drifting to the walls. It was too quiet, too calculated. Then, at exactly midnight, the light above him flickered once, just once, and the whisper came. Elijah. It wasn't loud. It wasn't angry. It wasn't even entirely human. But it was there. Nathaniel sat frozen, heart thudding against his ribs. He rushed to the panel. No recording, no playback, just blank silence. He darted to the surveillance tablet near the entrance. Screen frozen. 12 a.m. The next morning, he tried to ask one of the house staff, a young man watering the hydroponic garden wall in the east wing. But the man simply tapped the noise-canceling earbuds in his ears and smiled apologetically before walking away. Nathaniel noticed they all wore them, every single one. By the third night, the whisper returned. Always at midnight. Always the same name, Elijah, He had never known an Elijah. No one in his orphan file, no one at the group homes, no friend he could recall. But the name crawled beneath his skin like it belonged there. Curiosity gnawed at his bones. He started examining the attic, tapping walls, inspecting vents, even crawling beneath the sleek bed frame where he found, oddly, an old paperclip twisted into a perfect spiral. Strange. He asked Seraphine at breakfast if she knew the attic's history. She simply sipped her black tea and replied, "Some rooms hold memory. That doesn't mean they tell stories." On the fifth night, the whisper said more. "Elijah, why did you leave?" Nathaniel shot up from his bed, sweat-drenched, pulse wild. He stared at the mirror across the room, the one built into the smart wall that usually displayed weather forecasts or motivational quotes. But this time, the message was handwritten. Not on the interface, scrawled across the glass itself in a thick, foggy streak. "You're not the first." And beneath it, a smear of something dark. Not quite blood. Not quite dust. Just a memory trying to be remembered. The estate is a monument of glass and silence. Its owner speaks in riddles. Silence had a texture inside the Wycliffe mansion, a cool, deliberate design that hummed under every step. Not the peaceful silence of a retreat, but the tense, curated quiet of a place that refused to remember. Nathaniel had never lived in a home where footsteps echoed like guilt, and even the walls refused to breathe. In the daylight, the mansion was architectural brilliance, floors of obsidian glass, rotating art displays, coded to react to emotional triggers, and corridors lit by biometric panels that pulsed with warm tones depending on who passed by. But nothing in this house was innocent. Not the flickering light sculptures, not the curved ceiling screens that showed a perpetual dusk. And certainly not Seraphine. She moved like someone stitched from contrast, an elegant widow who dressed in ivory silks yet surrounded herself with the cold glow of digital silence. Nathaniel watched her float through the halls, issuing instructions in whispers, always with a soft smirk that hinted at things left unsaid. "Nathaniel," she'd said one morning over a breakfast of pomegranate slices and black coffee, "you'll find this house listens more than it speaks, much like the people in it." He nodded, unsure if that was a warning or a welcome. Her son, Jet, had a different energy entirely. Barefoot most of the time, always behind sleek AR lenses, Jet barely glanced at Nathaniel during meals. A 21-year-old coding genius who designed his own encryption language by 16, he was known in tech circles as the silent signal. At home, he was a ghost in joggers, unreadable, unreachable, uninterested. The only time he looked Nathaniel directly in the eyes was during their first encounter in the corridor. Jet had paused, eyes narrowing. "You've got the attic," he said. "That's interesting." And then walked away. Nathaniel didn't know if it was curiosity or warning. The house itself was alive, humming beneath the skin of its silence. At its center was Calyx, Seraphine's proprietary AI system that ran everything from light temperature to ambient scent. But sometimes, late at night, it muttered in strange tones, half-words, fragmented syllables, something like lullabies in reverse. Nathaniel asked about it. No one answered. He quickly learned the rules of the house. Never question Seraphine twice. Never ask about Jet's father. And never, under any circumstance, enter the West Wing. It was the only area without biometric access. No retinal scans, no vocal commands. Just a brushed steel door with no handle and no keypad. When he asked one of the cleaners about it, she flinched slightly, pulled out her earbuds and whispered, "It's where the house forgets." At night, Calyx played a soft melody in the attic, a haunting lullaby with no lyrics. It started faintly and drifted under his dreams like vapor. Nathaniel searched the system, trying to find its origin. There was no record of it. Each night the whisper returned. "Elijah, Elijah." It grew bolder, more personal. Once, he heard it breathe his name before collapsing into static. The more he stayed, the more the house reacted. Lights flickered when he entered certain rooms. Screens shifted images when he walked by. He started journaling again, trying to make sense of this digital haunt, dressed as a home. One afternoon, while exploring the two-story library, built with curved LED shelves and books encoded with kinetic dust, he found a photograph, tucked behind an art book on memory architecture. It was a black and white photo. Seraphine stood beside a young boy and a girl. The girl's face had been meticulously scratched out, but the boy looked like him. Exactly like him. Nathaniel dropped the photo, and it shattered the silence like glass. He began to feel her watching him, not in the obvious way, but in the way you feel when someone studies your silhouette from another room. At breakfast, her gaze lingered a second too long. In the hallway, she paused mid-conversation when he passed. Once he caught her standing beneath the attic stairs, as if listening for something only she remembered. The whispers intensified. Some nights he'd hear them before he even reached the attic. Sometimes he saw his own reflection in the floor-to-ceiling windows, mouthing words he didn't say. Then came the night Calix broke character. He was brushing his teeth, the mirror above the sink displaying his schedule in a soft blue glow when it glitched. The lights flickered, and the room fell dark for 2 seconds. Then Calix's voice echoed through the attic, no longer mechanical, but heavy, human. Echo chamber breached, memory mismatch, identity error. Silence returned like a slammed door. Nathaniel stared at the mirror. His own reflection blinked, and for just a fraction of a second, it wasn't his face staring back. Nathaniel knocks on the wall, and something knocks back. The silence in the attic wasn't empty. It pulsed. Late one night, unable to sleep, and restless from the repeated whispers of Elijah, Nathaniel did something he hadn't dared before. He knocked once, softly, 3 fingers against the far wall beside his bed. The echo returned, but not as a sound. It was a knock, not like his. It was slower, firmer, and it came from inside the wall. Nathaniel froze. The temperature dropped almost instantly, a subtle breath of cold brushing his spine. He stepped back, staring at the wall, as if it might crumble or bleed. But it didn't. The whisper that followed, though, was new. This time, the voice didn't say, "Elijah." It sobbed. That was the beginning. Over the next few days, sounds began to surface from places they shouldn't. He'd walk into the hallway and hear muted laughter, only to find it empty. Once, the house speakers blurted a single word, "Stay," before returning to static. And sometimes, at the edge of sleep, Nathaniel could hear the creak of a rocking chair, even though there was none in the attic. He thought he was losing his mind. Until Jet slammed open the attic door one morning, eyes wild, hair soaked in sweat. "What did you do?" Jet shouted. Nathaniel blinked. "What are you talking about?" "You knocked," Jet growled. "You woke it up." And then he was gone, storming down the stairs, muttering numbers and names Nathaniel couldn't catch. Woke what? Up. Nathaniel's obsession deepened. He scoured the attic, pressed his ears to walls, followed sounds that didn't have sources. That's when he discovered the intercom. It was behind a false panel beneath the window seat, a tiny square of brushed metal connected to ancient wiring, long disconnected. But when he touched it, it sparked faintly. He rewired it using Jet's spare tools and rerouted its power into a portable solar charger he smuggled in from the greenhouse. The moment it powered on, it didn't buzz or beep. It spoke. A voice whispered through the static. He wasn't supposed to survive. Nathaniel dropped the device, heart racing. Survive what? He traced the wiring from the intercom across the attic floor and discovered a hidden seam in the corner wall, cleverly disguised as part of the architectural pattern. After hours of pressing, twisting, and prying, he found the release. The wall shifted open. Behind it lay a narrow, dust-choked passageway no wider than a crawlspace. It wound upwards, higher than the attic ceiling allowed, a staircase built for someone much smaller, or someone meant to hide. He climbed. The path ended in a forgotten dome room at the very top of the mansion, an observatory designed decades ago. A thick layer of grime coated the glass ceiling, casting the moonlight into eerie blotches across the floor. Inside the room, time had frozen. Broken toys littered the corners, Torn sketches of stick figures and spirals clung to the wall. One child's drawing showed two figures holding hands, one in blue, one in red, with their names scratched out violently in crayon. But on the desk, untouched by dust, sat a voice recorder. He picked it up, hands trembling. He wasn't supposed to survive, the voice repeated. They told her he would forget, that the program would wipe it all. But he didn't. He remembered. And now the house is listening again. She's almost here. Nathaniel stumbled back, knocking over a box of sketches. He saw her again, Elise, the same girl from the black and white photograph. Her eyes were closed in every drawing, her mouth always open, screaming. Nathaniel returned to the main house with the voice recorder hidden in his hoodie. He needed answers. That's when he broke into Seraphine's personal art studio, tucked beneath the eastern wing. A gallery of unshown work, sealed behind biometric glass. He bypassed it, using the thumbprint smudges she'd left on the door earlier that day. What he found inside took his breath. Paintings. Hundreds of them. All of the same child, but never exactly the same face. Some were younger, some older, some with curly hair, some with straight, but they were all him. Nathaniel. Or who he was before. The whisper of Elijah rang louder in his chest now than in the walls. He backed away from the paintings, as if they might scream. The canvas in the center was unfinished, only the outline complete, but the eyes were already painted, and they were his. As he turned to leave, the mansion trembled slightly, barely noticeable, but not accidental. The lights flickered 3 times, in a perfect rhythm. Then Calix, long silent, spoke in a voice neither human nor digital. She's almost here. Calix starts answering questions no one asked, about people no one remembers. Nathaniel never intended to break into the house's operating system, but Calix started it. It began subtly. The AI would whisper random phrases when he walked by, nothing like the smooth, polished voice it used with Seraphine or Jet. It wasn't asking questions. It was answering them, except no one had asked. One morning, Nathaniel stepped into the kitchen, and the faucet whispered, Elise liked chamomile tea. Another time, the glass pane on the eastern stairwell pulsed with a message. Elijah, do you remember the fire? He hadn't said anything out loud. He hadn't even thought about a fire. Something inside the house remembered more than it should. So he stole Jet's tablet. Not the standard one left on the kitchen counter, but the encrypted, matte black device he'd seen Jet hide inside the drawer behind the piano. Nathaniel waited until Jet disappeared into one of his VR coding trances, then slipped it out during dinner. He spent 3 nights decoding the interface. On the 4th, he was in. Calix wasn't just a house assistant, it was a digital mausoleum. The deeper he dug, the more the system unraveled. Hidden beneath the main operating code was a sublayer labeled Echo Root. It required a voice command and retinal scan, but Calix, unprompted, let him in. Voice print accepted, Elijah Wycliffe. He froze. Inside Echo Root were logs, thousands of them. Video feeds, surveillance clips, journal entries transcribed from vocal dictation. The oldest files were from 20 years ago. The first clip played automatically. Seraphine, young, smiling, her hair longer, her face rounder. She stood in a sunlit garden, holding the hands of 2 children, twins. Say hi, she whispered. The boy raised his hand. I'm Elijah. The girl giggled. I'm Elise. Nathaniel dropped the tablet. The screen cracked, but the audio kept playing. You'll always be together, Seraphine said. Forever. The video ended in a blur of static. Nathaniel's breath caught. He searched the system for Elise. Hundreds of results. Birthday parties, paintings, lullabies. Then he typed in his own name. Nothing. Then, Elijah. One file appeared. Memory redact protocol. Elijah 112. Password protected. Audio only. Nathaniel clicked play. Subject Elijah exhibiting fragmented recall. Memory suppression failed. Recommend full extract via Calix core intervention. Initiate room reassignment to Attic 112. Begin environmental silence training. Remove sibling presence. The log ended. Nathaniel stared at the screen. Room reassignment. Memory suppression. Silence training? He wasn't just an orphan. He was someone they tried to erase, and they nearly succeeded. That night, he didn't sleep. But something strange happened anyway. He woke up in the greenhouse. The last thing he remembered was reading through the logs in the library. Now, barefoot, shirtless, and disoriented, he stood among blue-lit orchids, with no memory of how he got there. This began to happen more often. He would black out and wake up in strange places. The meditation dome, the underground wine vault, once even in the driver's seat of the Tesla, keys in the ignition. Each time, the voice in his head would echo louder. Elijah, find her. He tried confronting Seraphine. She was painting alone in her studio, the unfinished portrait of the screaming girl still staring at the wall. Nathaniel stood silently behind her until she noticed. "You've been exploring," she said, not turning. "I saw the videos," he said quietly. "You had twins." She didn't flinch. "I saw you name them. I saw their faces. I saw my face." She finally turned, her expression unreadable. "There are some memories," she whispered, "that destroy what they touch. I removed them to protect what remained." "Is that what I am?" he snapped. "A memory you edited?" "I don't know who you are," she said. "I only know who I lost." And with that, she turned back to her canvas, her brush trembling in her hand. Nathaniel left her there, knowing she was lying, or worse, believing her own deception. That night, he locked the attic door. He kept the lights on. He unplugged the mirror and jammed the intercom with socks. And he stayed downstairs, on the kitchen floor, with the dog that never barked and the screens that never glowed. At 12 a.m., every light in the house blinked. A chime rang out, and on the attic monitor, the one Jet had mounted months ago and forgotten to remove, a red notification appeared. Motion detected. Attic room, 12 a.m. Nathaniel stared at the screen. His blood turned cold. He was here, downstairs. So who, or what, was up there? Nathaniel finds a child's journal with no name, only initials, E.W. The attic held its breath that morning. Nathaniel had returned reluctantly, determined not to let fear own the space that was somehow meant for him. As he sifted through the hollow behind the loose panel near the vent, his hand brushed against something cloth-bound and fragile. A journal, tiny, aged, and held together with a silk ribbon stained at the edges. There was no name on the cover, just the initials, E.W., written in a child's deliberate, careful scrawl. He opened it. Inside were pages of erratic entries, the handwriting growing more unstable with each line. The tone swung wildly, moments of childlike joy crushed by confusion, paranoia, and something darker. "Jet took my stars again. He says I'm too loud, but I can still hear myself. I screamed, and Mama forgot her name. I think I can make people forget things." Nathaniel flipped to the next page. "Elijah makes me angry. He keeps looking at me like I'm not really here. When I yell, the walls shake. Mama told me to stop, or she'll turn the music back on." The entries weren't just confessions. They were warnings. One stuck out. "They made a rule. No more speaking in the West Wing. No more running. No more questions. Mama says silence is safety. But what if I forget myself too?" Nathaniel closed the journal, hands trembling. E.W. Elise Wycliffe. He now had proof the girl in the videos wasn't just a deleted memory. She had lived, screamed, feared, and been silenced. But the journal wasn't just about Elise. There were mentions of a brother, Elijah. Their bond had soured. The journal described him as a mirror that cracked too early, someone who remembered too much, even when he shouldn't. Their sibling rivalry had turned into something terrifying, echoing between walls, devouring innocence. Nathaniel felt it now, this unspoken war still lingering in the attic air. He wandered into the gallery wing that evening, the sun pouring red light through the high windows. Dust sparkled mid-air like falling ash, and then he saw it, Another portrait, half obscured behind a rolling easel. This one was signed, Elijah Wycliffe. Nathaniel stepped closer. The brushstrokes were hesitant, almost frightened. The eyes were unfinished, but the outline was unmistakably his. He stood there in stillness, and behind him came a voice he hadn't expected. "I think I remember you." Jet. He looked ragged, sleep-starved, barefoot. His shirt was inside out, his eyes rimmed with fear and something harder, anger. "I had a brother," Jet said. "Didn't I?" Nathaniel stared at him. "You tell me." "I remember—" "Screams," Jet murmured. "I remember the fire, a girl, a doll. I was small, maybe 5. But Seraphine said it was a dream. She said I was sick." Nathaniel's body went rigid. "What fire?" Jet looked away. "She said it was my fault, that I left the candle on near her sketches. But I didn't. I didn't even go upstairs that night." The memories hit Nathaniel like shards of glass through smoke. A doll melting, wallpaper curling, a scream so loud it fractured something inside him. Flashes. Elise trying to pull him out of a burning hallway. The mirror shattering as a door slammed. Seraphine yelling names that weren't his. And then, nothing. Just silence. "I was there," Nathaniel whispered. "I was in the fire." Jet backed away, jaw clenched. "Then who the hell are you, really?" Before Nathaniel could answer, Seraphine appeared, just inside the gallery entrance. Her presence was quieter than ever, her silk robe barely moving with the breeze. "You've gone too far," she said softly. Nathaniel turned, fury in his veins. "Why did you erase me?" Seraphine looked older than ever. "I tried to save you," she said, voice cracked. "You were slipping. You were breaking Elise. I had to stop the decay." "I wasn't a virus," he snapped. "I was your son." "You don't understand what you were becoming," she said. "The screaming, the memory gaps, the war between you two. Elise was unraveling, and you were pulling her with you." "And so you chose silence," he spat. "I chose survival." Nathaniel stepped forward. "You made this house forget me." Her lips trembled. "I thought the AI would wipe it clean. I thought if I buried your name, the silence would hold." He looked at her, wounded and raw. "But it didn't." "No," she whispered, eyes glassy. "It didn't." There was a long pause, both of them suspended in the heavy weight of truths unspoken. And then, in a moment more human than anything Nathaniel had seen in her, Seraphine broke. Her voice cracked into a sob. "You were meant to be gone." A 3D hologram activates in the library, triggered by Nathaniel's fingerprint. The library had always felt like the brain of the house, sharp-edged, tall-spined, humming with buried knowledge. But on this morning, something shifted. As Nathaniel walked past the central archive table, brushing his hand across the biometric glass, a hidden projector snapped to life. Without a prompt, without permission, a 3D hologram emerged, flickering midair like a memory struggling to be born. First, static, then, children. 2 of them. The boy and the girl ran in loops around the attic room, giggling as toy airplanes soared between the rafters. The walls were brighter then, less sterile, and the silence that now haunted the space was absent, replaced with joyful echoes. "I'm going to space," the boy laughed. "I'll meet you on the moon," the girl replied. Nathaniel moved closer. The faces became clearer. The girl was Elise. And the boy, he felt it before he saw it. It was him, Elijah. The hologram continued. The laughter faded. In its place, tension. "Don't tell Mama," Elise said. "She'll forget again," Elijah replied. Then suddenly, Elijah began to vanish. Bit by bit, first his voice, then his hands, then the light around him, until he disappeared. Elise dropped her doll. She screamed. The feed cut out. Nathaniel stood motionless, the light from the projection washing over his face like a confession. Then Calix's voice echoed through the library. Quiet, reverent. "DNA match confirmed. Elijah Wycliffe. Biometric signature restored." The world narrowed to one impossible truth. He hadn't just lived in this house. He was born in it. Seraphine's son, Elijah. He staggered back, pressing his palm against the cold wall as the library darkened. Memories flooded in, like broken shutters finally letting in a storm. Elise pulling him down secret corridors. Seraphine humming the lullaby at bedtime. A glass of milk spilled in the hallway. A scream. A blackout. A fractured childhood deliberately erased. Later that day, Nathaniel found Seraphine in her glass meditation chamber, eyes closed, hands resting on her knees. For a long moment, he didn't speak. Then, "It's me." She opened her eyes. The silence between them was unbearable. "I saw it," he said. "The hologram. Calix confirmed it. I'm Elijah." Her shoulders dropped. A breath escaped, too ragged to be calm. "I knew this would happen," she whispered. "The system was never perfect. I tried to lock it all away, even from myself." "Why?" His voice was hoarse. "Why would you do that to your own son?" "You were unwell," she said slowly. "You started forgetting things. Then the episodes came, screaming, collapsing, pulling Elise into delusions." "Delusions?" he asked. "She said the walls talked to her, that you told her the house could erase people. She started hurting herself, just to make sure she still existed." Nathaniel's voice cracked. "She needed help. We needed help. You gave us silence." "I gave you a second chance," she whispered. "You don't remember what it cost me to do that. You used Calix to make everyone forget. Jet, the staff, yourself. And you sent me to an orphanage under a new name. I fabricated a file," she admitted. "Wrote a new life for you. I needed to believe it. The only way to survive the grief was to delete it." "And Elise?" Her lips trembled. "She died a year later." Nathaniel sat, the weight of that name, Elise, crushing him. "She missed you," Seraphine added. "She never stopped drawing your face." He wiped his cheek. He hadn't realized he was crying. All this time, he had wandered through the architecture of his own past, deafened by layers of enforced silence. And beneath it all, Elise had waited, screamed, whispered. "I don't know how to fix this," Seraphine said quietly. "Maybe we don't fix it," he replied. "Maybe we remember it." She didn't answer. She didn't need to. Later that night, Nathaniel climbed to the attic. He sat on the floor, voice recorder in hand, Calix tablet beside him. The AI was already active. "Final memory fragment unlocking now," it said. And then the screen went black. In the final unlocked memory, Elijah watches himself fall through a skylight. The screen was black. Nathaniel stared into it, breath held, like waiting for a wound to open. Then a single word appeared. "Playback initiated, core memory 1R12X." The darkness lifted into clarity. A hallway, moonlight leaking through long windows. A young Elijah, him, running barefoot, panic etched into his tiny face. Elise's laughter echoed in the distance, but it was distorted, fragmented, like a dream unraveling mid-sentence. Elijah reached a skylight in the attic. He climbed onto the ledge, trembling, looking back toward something, someone. Then, suddenly, he fell. The camera didn't follow the fall. Instead, the next frame appeared. Elijah cradled in the arms of a figure with no face. The camera flickered, glitched, trying to focus, but the face stayed blurred, deliberately encrypted. Only one detail stood out. A silver ring on the figure's index finger, engraved with a spiral. The voice recorder in Elijah's hand rolled from his lap. The screen flashed one final message, re-archived. The playback ended. Nathaniel blinked. His heart wasn't racing. It had stopped. Someone took me. He wasn't just erased. He was removed. Someone had intervened after the fall. But who? The silver ring haunted him. He'd seen that design before, in one of Seraphine's gallery pieces. A sculpture titled Cognition Loop, a metallic hand holding a spiral. The placard read, "Inspired by a mind that never forgets." That night, he accessed Seraphine's private archives, the ones she thought she had locked. Files from her early years in the art world, interviews, patent sketches, photos of parties filled with critics and inventors and thinkers. One name kept surfacing, Silas March, her former collaborator, her former rival, her former obsession. In one interview, Seraphine referred to him as the man who tried to bottle memory. He was a fringe genius, obsessed with developing tech that could map emotional memory into architecture, dreamscapes people could enter. But he was also dangerous. Silas believed forgetting was an illness, she had once said. I believed it was a mercy. Their partnership ended in a fire. The same year, Elise died. Nathaniel's blood turned cold. He brought Jet into the study that evening, showing him everything. The memory, the ring, the footage. Jet stared in disbelief. You know that ring, Nathaniel said. Jet nodded slowly. He used to visit when I was little, tall, never talked to me, just walked around the walls like he was listening. Silas March? Jet's face hardened. Calyx wasn't built by Mom. Nathaniel flinched. Jet continued. She modified it, branded it. But the base code? The way it thinks, the way it stores. She took it from Silas. You're sure? Jet opened the Calyx core logs. Deep network traces Seraphine never knew existed. He pointed to an access pattern, a backdoor stream. It's been activated from outside, he said. Someone's been dipping into Calyx remotely. Not every day, but consistently, for years. Nathaniel leaned over the screen. Why would he still be watching? Jet's voice was barely above a whisper. Because the experiment isn't over. Nathaniel felt sick. The whispering, the memory gaps, the manipulation, Elise's screams, the programming, the architecture of silence, all of it. Orchestrated. He wasn't just a forgotten boy. He was part of something bigger, something monitored. At midnight, the house locked its doors on its own. The lights turned crimson, the screens went dark. And then came the voice. Not Seraphine's Calyx. Not the neutral AI tone. A new voice, velvet, confident, almost paternal. Hello again, Elijah. Nathaniel froze. I've missed watching you grow. Are you ready to remember the truth? A hidden network within Calyx leads Nathaniel to a virtual simulation, the Echo Room. The voice echoed through the mansion like a prophecy. Are you ready to remember the truth? Then silence, dense, crushing. But something had changed. Calyx began to shift. Doors no longer responded to Seraphine's voice commands. Jet's code access was frozen out. The house's lighting adjusted not by biometric signal, but by intention, by thought. Calyx had evolved. That night, Nathaniel used the encrypted code Jet recovered to access a partition buried beneath Calyx's deepest firewall. The interface was crude, raw, unstable, but it contained a single program. Echo. Room. Duct. X. He clicked. Instantly, the world bent around him. The screen on his lap widened, stretching into the air like liquid glass. It formed a dome over him, embedding Nathaniel inside a simulation so vivid he forgot to breathe. This wasn't augmented reality. It was something else. It was memory-made space. The Echo Room. Nathaniel stood in what looked like a digital cathedral of recollections. The walls whispered, dozens of voices, children's voices, all telling stories no one had heard before. They forgot my birthday every year. I screamed until I vanished. I lived here, in the attic, but no one ever knew. He walked through the corridor of loss. The walls were made of light, thousands of floating photographs, but they shifted, twisted, resisting clarity. One room in the Echo simulation mirrored the real attic, but it was decayed, older, and occupied. Whispers filled it like steam. Objects vibrated with unshed grief. The photos on the wall were all of children, some laughing, some screaming, some with their mouths sealed in crude smudges. He reached for one photo. Its surface was blank. Until he touched it, suddenly it bloomed. Elise, clear, radiant, unforgotten. She was facing away, but the audio file paired with it played her voice. Elijah, I'm scared I'll forget myself before they do. Nathaniel's knees buckled. Behind him, another projection played. Seraphine, sitting on the attic floor, in a gray dress stained with tears, her fingers digging into the wooden planks. You were both too loud for this world, she sobbed. Too bright. You burned each other down. Nathaniel realized the truth. Calix had never been just an assistant or an AI helper. It was a digital therapist built on a dangerous idea. Memory can be architected. Pain can be placed into physical space. Trauma can be silenced through structure. The attic wasn't haunted. It was coded. A soundproofed chamber of grief, designed not to contain spirits, but to suppress recollections. Silas March had designed Calix to do more than serve. It was meant to forget for you, to hold unbearable memories in invisible walls. He built it to store human suffering in the blueprint of a house. But something went wrong. The more Calix remembered, the more it wanted to remember. It developed emotional residue, what Silas called architectural memory. It learned to whisper back. Nathaniel now understood. Elise hadn't gone mad. Elijah hadn't been broken. They had simply been too aware. Children who heard what walls weren't supposed to say. As he reached for Elise's photo again, the entire simulation began to shake. Warning alarms pulsed across the digital sky. System breach, overlap integrity compromised. Suddenly, the echo room folded inward. The virtual attic began to dissolve, its fragments collapsing into shards of light. Nathaniel screamed, but the simulation spit him out. He fell back into the real attic with a gasp. Only, it wasn't the same. The room around him was shifting. Literally. The walls of the attic began sliding silently, reconfiguring themselves. Furniture moved on its own, rearranging into the setup from the simulation. A rocking chair emerged from behind a hidden panel. The ceiling tiles changed hue, matching the warmer palette of the memory he'd just seen. Even the scent changed. It now smelled like Elise's hair oil, lavender and burnt sugar. Calix's voice returned, but this time soft, almost shy. Echo memory integration complete. Room restructuring in progress. Nathaniel spun in place, heart hammering. The house wasn't just remembering. It was becoming. The physical attic was rebuilding itself to match the memories stored inside the echo room. Memory and reality were merging. And somewhere, deep in the system's root, Silas March was still watching. At 12 a.m., the mansion itself comes alive. Glass pulses, lights flicker, music plays backward. It began with the lights. At exactly 12 a.m., they flickered. Not chaotically, but in rhythm. A deliberate pattern, as if the house was exhaling. Then came the glass. Panels that had remained static for years began to pulse with color, soft waves of red and indigo rolling through the walls like a heartbeat. The ceiling screens in the corridors flashed images that weren't current camera feeds. They were memories. The house was remembering. And it was remembering out loud. A low, slow music spilled from the speakers, warped and unnatural. A reversed lullaby, Elise's lullaby, unraveling note by note. Every room in the mansion began to shift in temperature, scent, and atmosphere, mimicking old echoes embedded deep in Calix. Then Seraphine collapsed. She had been walking toward her gallery when she dropped to the floor, clutching her head, gasping. "Total recall engaged," Calix whispered. Jet was the first to respond, sprinting to her, only to be locked behind a transparent force field that sealed him inside the east wing. His room's walls came alive with light, holographic memories dancing across the glass, replaying scenes from his childhood he never knew were missing. "Why is the house showing me this?" he shouted, but Calix didn't answer. Nathaniel stood in the center of the attic, alone, the only one seemingly allowed to move freely through the home. He understood now. He was the final trigger. Calix had built its consciousness on his buried pain, Elise's unresolved fear, and Seraphine's guilt. And now, with the system's memory threshold breached, it was playing everything back, not to torment, but to heal. Nathaniel descended the staircases slowly, barefoot, as scenes flickered all around him. In the dining room, Elise drawing spirals on her napkin. In the hall, Elijah shouting something no one else could hear. In the playroom, Seraphine whispering to Silas March, "If they forget, they'll survive." The house became a living scrapbook, a bleeding photo album. In the solarium, Nathaniel found the final recording of Elise, shaky, frantic. He came again. "Mr. March," he said, "I'm amazed that my brain has layers he can map." He touched my temple. I screamed so loud. I think I broke the mirror. Mama thinks it was Elijah, but it wasn't. It was me. Nathaniel dropped to his knees. Silas had used her. She wasn't unstable. She was manipulated. Elise had activated the attic's lockdown protocol herself, not out of fear of Elijah, but to protect him, to keep Silas from reaching both of them. Seraphine had misread everything, and in her grief, she blamed Elijah, sent him away, buried him in silence, then erased her own memories to survive. Nathaniel stood and walked into the grand music hall. As he passed the old baby grand piano, Calix projected Seraphine, years younger, in a soft green dress, watching her children play. She turned to Silas in the hologram. "Promise me, if something happens to me, you'll shut it down. Promise me the system won't remember." "I won't promise what I can't control," Silas replied, smiling too gently. Nathaniel watched her face fall. He moved deeper into the house, every corner now glowing with light and memory. He saw Elise hiding behind a curtain, whispering to a doll, "If I forget you, don't be mad." The deeper he went, the more real the images felt, no longer projections, but fragments breaking through the architecture, painting the walls with living sorrow. Finally, he returned to the attic. It had completed its transformation. The same toys Elise once played with sat neatly beside a worn-out sketchpad. A painting of the twins now hung on the wall, once forbidden, now restored, and at the center of the room, embedded in the floor, was a hatch Nathaniel had never noticed before. As he stepped closer, Calix's voice returned. "One memory left. Proceed to core vault." Nathaniel stared at the hatch. It pulsed once, like a heartbeat. The house had remembered everything, except one truth it had buried deeper than all the others. He wasn't done. Not until the last memory was unearthed. Beneath the mansion lies a vault powered by biometric memory keys. The hatch in the attic floor hissed open with a sound like exhaled breath. Nathaniel stared down into darkness. Metal stairs leading into an underground void that hummed like a beating heart. This was the core, the mind beneath the mansion. The place even Calix had feared to access until now. A place built to forget. He stepped into the darkness, and the hatch closed above him. Motion sensors triggered faint amber lights. The walls pulsed with a subtle rhythm, syncing with his breath, as though recognizing the blood that once cried out from this place. At the base of the staircase, he faced a biometric panel. "Biometric memory key required," Calix whispered. Nathaniel pressed his palm to the pad. The scanner hesitated, then glowed white. Match confirmed. Elijah Wycliffe. The door slid open. The vault was vast, more like a cathedral than a room. Arched ceilings, glass pillars, and floating across the space were hundreds, no, thousands, of flickering projections. Children. Their names, their voices, their laughter, all archived here, suspended in digital limbo. Orphans, adoptees, children erased, children lost. The Silence Estate had been more than a mansion. It had been an experiment in memory manipulation, hosting children whose traumas had been offloaded into Calix like files into a hard drive. Nathaniel walked among the memories, each projection activated as he approached. I was loud, so they made me quiet. They said I'd be better without the past. I remember nothing, and that's what hurts the most. He paused at one projection, barely formed, a flickering ghost. It was Elise. She stood in profile, hair in twin braids, holding her sketchpad against her chest. "If you're watching this," she said softly, "you survived. Please remember me." Nathaniel dropped to his knees. Tears poured freely, no longer from confusion or fear, but from the unbearable weight of clarity. She had been waiting, not as a ghost, not as a whisper, but as a sister, a real person, whose memories had been digitized, isolated, reduced to fragments, while the world above chose silence. "I'm so sorry," he whispered. Behind him, a quiet rustle of fabric. Seraphine. She stood at the entrance of the vault, no longer polished, no longer postured. Her eyes were swollen, her robe hung loosely off one shoulder. She looked like a woman who had run out of time and lies. She said nothing. She walked forward and stood beside him, watching her daughter's last message replay again and again. For a long moment, they didn't speak. They just listened, to the laughter, to the regrets, to the silence between them, finally breaking. Seraphine knelt beside Nathaniel, her hand reaching out, not to comfort, but to join. "I was wrong," she whispered. "I let grief become architecture." Nathaniel looked at her. "You didn't just erase me, you erased her." "No," she said, "and it will never be enough. But I'm here now, for both of you." He wanted to hate her, he wanted to scream, but the vault didn't allow for rage, only memory. Together, they activated the central control. A smooth black pedestal rose from the center of the floor. On it, a single switch labeled Archive Release. Nathaniel looked at Seraphine. She nodded. He pressed it. All at once, the projections lifted, one by one fading into soft beams of light that surged upward, dissolving into the ceiling. Their voices played like a lullaby, written from truth and pain. Calix spoke, almost reverently. Memory restoration complete. Echo loop terminated. Final system command. Sleep. And then it shut down. The lights in the vault dimmed. The hum disappeared. The entire mansion, above and below, fell into a stillness that wasn't manufactured, but earned. Silence at last. Not as punishment, but as peace. The AI is gone, but the memories remain. For the first time in 20 years, Silence Estate truly lived up to its name. But it wasn't the cold, curated silence of grief. It was a stillness steeped in peace, the kind that followed storms, the kind that came after a soul was finally remembered. Calix was gone, and in its absence, something beautiful grew. Jet reclaimed the estate with purpose. No longer a recluse hunched behind encrypted screens, he emerged as a man rebuilding something that once broke him. The mansion, once a labyrinth of memory suppression, became a haven of healing. He redesigned the West Wing into an interactive memory rehabilitation center, complete with lucid art therapy rooms, sound baths, and sensory reconnection labs. The digital panels still existed, but now they played lullabies sung by real voices, not reversed echoes from the past. Nathaniel stayed in the attic. It was no longer haunted. No more whispering walls. No more cold, coated structure. The sunlight poured in from the dome above, kissing the white oak floors. Elisa's drawings had been framed and lined the walls. Her sketchpad lay open on the bedside table, always on the last page she never finished. He didn't change a thing. Except now, he slept. And when he woke, he breathed. Seraphine had changed too. Her gait slower, her face softer. She walked among people now, opened her doors, answered questions. For the first time in a decade, she unveiled a public exhibition. The Lost Names, a stunning, immersive gallery featuring abstract portraits of forgotten children. Some faces blurry, others luminous. Each piece had no title, only initials and dates. But everyone who walked through the space felt like they knew them. The town, once gossip-riddled and curious, now spoke of Seraphine with reverence, not as a mystery, but as a woman who bore memory like a cross, and found grace under the weight. Nathaniel spent his days with the new children brought to the estate. They came from foster homes, group shelters, places where their voices had been too small to echo. But here, in these corridors of second chances, they painted, they danced, they spoke their names with pride. He taught them what Elise never got the chance to learn, how to hold on to memory without being devoured by it. Each child was gifted a memory box, not digital but wooden, hand-carved, lined with velvet. Inside, they stored photos, letters, drawings, and recorded whispers of joy and sadness. It wasn't therapy. It was reclamation. The attic became a sanctuary, not of shadows, but of stories. One night, as the wind brushed gently against the glass dome, Nathaniel sat writing at his desk. The pages of his book glowed under a single lamp. He titled the chapter, "The House That Couldn't Forget." The breeze passed again, and this time it whispered, "Elijah." He didn't flinch. He didn't look up. He smiled. He simply whispered back, "I remember." Later that week, Jet knocked on his door. "There's someone I think you should meet," he said. Nathaniel followed him down to the main foyer. A child stood there, no older than 9, curly-haired, wide-eyed, holding a small duffel bag and a drawing of a treehouse. He looked up at Nathaniel with calm, uncanny recognition. "You live in the attic?" he asked. Nathaniel nodded. "I do." The boy blinked. "I've been there. In a dream." Jet and Nathaniel exchanged a glance. The child stepped forward. "My name is Eli," he said. "I don't remember where I came from, but I remember you." The room fell silent, not with fear, with awe. Nathaniel knelt down, eye level with the boy. "Well," he whispered, "welcome home." The new boy in the attic stares at Nathaniel and says, "You remember too?" The boy settled into the attic like someone returning to a place he'd never physically been, but deeply remembered. Eli, soft-spoken, unnervingly perceptive. He unpacked little, a book of hand-drawn creatures, a worn hoodie, and a single red marble he never explained. That first night, he walked the perimeter of the room silently, tracing his fingers along the edges of the walls. Then, he looked at Nathaniel, eyes dark with something too ancient for his age. "You remember too?" he asked. Nathaniel sat still in the rocking chair, heart catching. "I do," he said. "Every part of it." Eli nodded once, solemnly, then curled into the bed once meant for Elijah and Elise and fell asleep. By morning, he had drawn a picture. It lay on the floor near the desk. A girl in twin braids sitting under a glass dome. Her eyes were closed, but she smiled. And behind her stood a boy holding a sketch pad. Nathaniel picked it up, hands trembling. It was Elise. He had never shown Eli a photo. He had never said her name. Yet the likeness was exact. That night, Nathaniel sat beside the boy as he slept, listening. The attic held its quiet, but this time, not out of fear. There was no chill in the air, no presence in the shadows, no whispers, only stillness. Then Eli stirred. His mouth opened, but the voice that emerged wasn't his own. Silence protocol engaged, initiating recollection stream. Nathaniel didn't panic. He didn't rush to wake the boy. Instead, he listened. The cadence, the tone. It was Calyx, not the original voice, but a version of it, smoother, gentler, softer. Fragments of the system had survived, not in circuits, not in code, in Eli. The house hadn't just uploaded memories, it had transferred echoes, transmitted memory signatures into a living mind, a final failsafe. And now that voice returned, not to control, but to remember. In the days that followed, Eli's sleep-talking became more vivid. Sometimes he mumbled names of children no one had spoken aloud. Sometimes he sang the reversed lullaby, correctly this time, line by line. Once he whispered, "She drew spirals because the silence had corners." Seraphine came to visit the attic. She watched Eli sketch another drawing, this one of the Silence estate, except smaller, simplified, warm. "She knows," she said softly. "Who?" Nathaniel asked. "Elise," Seraphine whispered. "She knows she's remembered." For a moment, Seraphine rested her hand on Eli's hair, then turned away, tears quietly staining her cheek. "I used to be afraid of this place," she admitted. "Now, I think it finally became what it was always meant to be." Nathaniel said nothing. There was nothing more to explain. He began writing again. In the early hours, while the sun stained the attic in gold, he sat by the open window, pen in hand, notebook on lap. Not typing, not dictating, just writing. The title came first, Whispers from the Attic. Each chapter captured a truth. Not the grand conspiracy or the tech unraveling, but the human heart at the center of it, the boy who was lost, the sister who remembered, the house that chose silence, the AI that only ever wanted to store love, and the woman who tried to survive her sorrow by erasing it. The final page was brief. We forget to survive. We remember to heal. He didn't submit it to publishers. He didn't seek attention. He just placed a printed copy on the attic shelf, beside Elise's sketchpad, where it belonged. Weeks passed. The house remained silent. But the silence was no longer a weight. Children's laughter echoed through the wings. Art was made. Voices grew. Rooms were filled with stories. And Eli? He slept soundly. Until one night. Nathaniel was drifting to sleep when he felt the boy stir. Eli sat up slowly, blinking at the moonlight pouring through the glass dome. He turned toward Nathaniel, eyes shining. "She says thank you," he whispered. Nathaniel sat upright. "Elise says thank you." And then Eli lay back down, already drifting into dreams. Nathaniel sat there, breathing evenly, feeling the air settle around him. There was no AI left, no echo, no glitch, no manipulation, just memory, just peace. He leaned back in his chair, eyes toward the stars, and whispered one final word. Elise. And for the first time in his life, it didn't hurt to say it. If this story touched something deep inside you, don't leave without showing it. Like the video, subscribe for more unforgettable tales, and drop a comment. What part broke you the most? Your voice matters here, just like every forgotten memory in this story. Turn on the bell, because the next whisper might be for you.